My name is Vex, and I thought I knew terror. Ha! What a fool I was. 3 cycles ago, our scout ship crash-landed on this nightmare planet called Earth. The impact scattered our crew across dense woodlands teeming with creatures that could tear through our exoskeletons like wet paper. Our captain, Zorb, immediately ordered us to find the deepest cave possible and hide until rescue arrived. Standard protocol, he squeaked, his 4 eyes darting nervously. When faced with apex predators, we burrow and wait. Makes perfect sense, right? Every civilized species in the galaxy follows this rule. When danger approaches, you hide. You stay quiet. You pray the big scary things don't notice your existence. It's worked for millions of years across thousands of worlds, but nobody told the human about our protocol. We first spotted him through our cave entrance on the 2nd day. A bipedal creature, barely covered by thin fabric, carrying a primitive wooden stick. My teammate Clicks nearly fainted. Look at the size of those teeth. Clicks whispered, pointing at the human's exposed mouth. And those claws at the end of his appendages. I'll admit, those 5-pronged manipulators did look menacing. But what truly horrified us was his behavior. Instead of seeking shelter like any reasonable being, this maniac was walking directly toward the sounds of snarling beasts. He's completely insane, muttered our engineer, Blip. No creature actively hunts apex predators. It's evolutionary suicide. We watched in stunned silence as the human approached a massive 4-legged beast with enormous fangs. The creature could have easily crushed him. Any normal being would have run screaming in the opposite direction. The human threw his stick at it. Not only did he throw his stick, but he had somehow sharpened the end to a deadly point. The makeshift weapon struck the beast's flank, causing it to roar in pain and fury. Now, surely, the human would demonstrate basic survival instincts and flee. Instead, he picked up a rock and hurled it at the wounded animal's head. By the moons of Zentari, breathed Captain Zorb, he's antagonizing it on purpose. The beast charged, foam dripping from its massive jaws. The human waited until the last possible second, then dove to the side, landing behind a cleverly positioned fallen log. The creature slammed into the makeshift barrier with bone-crushing force, stunning itself momentarily, when we realized the log hadn't fallen naturally. The human had placed it there. Deliberately. As a trap, while the beast shook its head in confusion, the human grabbed his spear and drove it deep into the creature's neck. The animal collapsed with a final, earth-shaking thud. We stared at each other in absolute bewilderment. This soft, seemingly defenseless being had just killed something 10 times his size using nothing but primitive tools and tactical thinking. Maybe he got lucky, suggested Clicks hopefully. We soon learned otherwise. Over the next few hours, we watched the human construct an elaborate network of snares, pitfall traps, and deadfalls throughout the surrounding forest. He worked with methodical precision, testing each mechanism multiple times before moving on to the next. Then came the fire.as darkness approached. Instead of seeking shelter like every other living thing on this planet, the human gathered dry materials and began rubbing sticks together. Smoke appeared, followed by small flames that grew into a roaring blaze. He's creating a beacon, gasped Blip. Every predator for miles will see that light. And smell the cooking meat, added Zorb, watching the human roast portions of his kill over the open flames, huddled deeper in our cave, expecting to witness the human's inevitable demise. Surely, something would emerge from the darkness to claim this foolish creature who dared to advertise his location so boldly. Things did emerge. Lots of things. Glowing eyes appeared at the edge of the firelight. Growls echoed through the trees. Massive shapes circled the human's position like shadows given form. The human simply sat beside his fire, calmly eating his meal, occasionally glancing at the lurking terrors with what I can only describe as mild interest. Why aren't they attacking? Whispered Clicks. That's when we noticed something extraordinary. The creatures were maintaining a respectful distance from the flames. They watched, they waited, but they didn't approach. The fire created a barrier that even apex predators wouldn't cross. The human finished his meal, stretched lazily, and lay down beside the warm flames. Within minutes, he was producing rhythmic breathing sounds that suggested sleep, sleep, while surrounded by the most dangerous creatures on the planet. "Impossible," muttered Captain Zorb. "No being can rest under such circumstances." Yet there he lay, peaceful and undisturbed, while death itself prowled just beyond the circle of light. As the night wore on, we took turns keeping watch, fascinated despite our terror. The humans slept soundly for exactly 8 hours, then awakened as the first rays of sunlight pierced the forest canopy, stretched again, rekindled his fire, and began preparing more food. The lurking predators had vanished with the darkness, but we knew they'd return. The humans seemed to know it too. He spent the morning expanding his trap network, creating more ingenious devices designed to maim, capture, or kill anything that approached uninvited. By midday, his death maze was complete, when 3 more humans appeared. 3 more of these apex predator hunting maniacs emerged from the forest, and my crew nearly passed out from sheer panic. If one human was terrifying enough to sleep surrounded by death itself, what would 4 of them accomplish? Total planetary extinction? "We're doomed," whimpered Clicks. "They're forming a hunting pack." The newcomers approached the first human's campsite with casual confidence that made my scales crawl. No cautious scanning for threats, no defensive postures, nothing. They just walked up like they owned the entire planet, which, apparently, they did. The original human greeted his companions with enthusiastic vocalizations and vigorous appendage waving. Then, to our absolute horror, they began sharing knowledge. The first human demonstrated his trap mechanisms while the others observed with keen interest, occasionally suggesting improvements. "Look at them," gasped Captain Zorb. "They're teaching each other more efficient ways to kill." Within hours, the humans had tripled the size of their death maze. They constructed elevated platforms in trees, complete with projectile launchers made from bent branches. They dug additional pitfalls camouflaged with vegetation and lined with sharpened stakes. They even created a backup fire site, because apparently one blazing beacon wasn't enough to satisfy their suicidal tendencies. But the truly insane part? They were enjoying themselves. These creatures laughed while designing instruments of destruction. They made jovial sounds when testing their lethal contraptions. One human actually started singing while weaving a rope snare that could decapitate a charging beast. "This is beyond madness," muttered Blip. "They're having fun with imminent death." As evening approached, the humans gathered around their main fire and began consuming more cooked meat. They passed around a container filled with some kind of fermented liquid that made them even more boisterous and reckless. When the real show started, the darkness brought visitors, just as before. But this time, instead of a few cautious predators maintaining respectful distance, the entire forest seemed to converge on the human camp. Dozens of glowing eyes reflected the firelight. Massive shapes prowled between the trees. Growls, roars, and otherworldly shrieks filled the air. Any reasonable species would have been paralyzed with terror. The humans started telling stories. Yes, you heard correctly. While surrounded by enough concentrated death to wipe out a small city, these lunatics entertained themselves with vocal narratives. And based on their animated gestures and dramatic vocal inflections, they were recounting previous encounters with dangerous creatures. They're bragging about hunting expeditions. I translated for my crew. That one just described stabbing something called a bear. The female is explaining how she outsmarted a pack of wolves. One human produced a primitive stringed instrument and began creating rhythmic sounds while the others vocalized in harmony. They were making music. In the middle of a predator convention. While death itself waited impatiently just beyond the fire's reach, suddenly, something moved through their trap network. We heard a sharp crack, followed by an agonized howl, then thrashing sounds that gradually faded to silence. The humans briefly paused their musical performance to listen, then resumed singing even louder than before. One of them actually raised his fermented beverage in a celebratory gesture toward the darkness. "They're toasting their successful kill," squeaked Clicks. While it's still happening, more sounds emerged from the trap network throughout the night. Snapping branches, triggered deadfalls, desperate animal cries cut short by perfectly positioned spears. Each successful trap activation prompted cheers and congratulatory appendage slapping among the humans. By dawn, at least 6 large predators had met their doom attempting to approach the human camp. The surrounding area looked like a battlefield, with massive corpses scattered among the sprung traps. The humans spent the morning harvesting useful materials from their victims. They stripped hide, extracted bones, collected teeth, and processed meat with practiced efficiency. Nothing went to waste. Then they did something that shattered my understanding of reality completely. They started building permanent structures, not temporary shelters for short-term survival. Actual dwellings designed for extended occupation. They were planning to stay here, in the middle of the most dangerous ecosystem on the planet, surrounded by creatures that could tear them apart without effort, and they intended to thrive. Captain, I said slowly, I don't think these humans are the prey species we assumed. Captain Zorb watched the humans construct their settlement with growing comprehension. No, Vex. I'm beginning to suspect they might be the apex predators we were hiding from all along. As if responding to his words, one of the humans looked directly at our cave entrance and smiled, revealing those menacing dental structures we'd noticed earlier. He waved, never did wait for rescue.